Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Without further ado, let me tell you about my guest, Psychic Medium Tracey Lockwood. And just like her name says, she is a renowned psychic medium. She's been doing this for many, many years. She is also a teacher if you are interested in learning to develop your medium or psychic abilities. She does so much within our community. I can go on and on how she has stood up to City Hall for psychic rights, for lack of a better term, and actually won, or got us a little bit further along there. And she's also one of the headliners at our conference this weekend for Luminary Ladies of the Blue Ridge. And of course, she's a radio host here on Revolution Radio. So welcome to the show, Tracey. It's so glad to have you back on here today.
I'm so happy to be here, Bernard. I love you dearly.
I love you too.
And you
You're
too,
such a good
Treva.
friend. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. So Tracey, let's jump right in, and perhaps we can share a little bit of what the experience was like for you when you first started to realize that you did have these psychic abilities. Was it scary? What were some of the symptoms, for lack of a better term, that you were experiencing when you first were able to tell?
Well, I didn't really, I sort of did this all my life. I just didn't know it was anything. And that's kind of something I'm big on, is getting the word out. I think it has a lot to do with the nomenclature that we use.
Yeah.
And so I have memories that go back to literally being in the crib. I didn't realize I was a medium per se until someone used that name in reference to me, and it was at Arthur Findlay College of Psychic Science in England in 2010. And they said, will the next medium take the platform? And I said, like, me? Like, I don't know why I was there. I just felt drawn to go there. I was actually just wanting to study, but I hadn't defined myself as a medium up until then. And I think that's true for a lot of people. They sort of hear those words, psychic or medium, and they think, oh yeah, that's those weird people, or they do something different, or I wish I could do that, but they don't identify with it as a term.
Right. And with that being said, there are different types of psychic ability. A lot of people, we use that as an umbrella term, but what are some of the different types? Like you said, you're a medium. We have, empaths and people that do psychometry. Yeah. What are some of the different types of psychic?
Well, there are different abilities within that category, but I think of it on an intuitive spectrum. Everybody has a knowledge that they have an instinct. You know, they know that they have a desire for heat, for cold, for food, clothing, shelter, sex, all the basics of life. We all have instinct. And we all have a gut feeling at that level that is kind of binary. It's like yes, no, safe, not safe, kind of primitive level of intuition. And that's our instinct. And then it goes along the spectrum to intuitive development. And intuition is knowledge. It's just knowing. And you just have a confidence that something is right or wrong. You might be reading the story beneath the conversation, the real story that goes on, not the words.
Right.
And that graduates into psychic ability, where you start saying things that are really wise, but you really have no idea how you knew that. So you're not able yet to identify the source of the information, but you're accurate and it's more flowy. It sort of goes from yes, no to I got a feeling to dead on accuracy.
Oh.
And then that graduates into mediumship when you are able to identify the source of the information, describe them much more than just you've heard of the discerning of spirits, much more than just it's a good spirit or a bad spirit,
Right.
It's much more complicated than that. It's being able to describe them and give evidence that you're talking to that person. And then it goes on into even a deeper expression of telepathy and empathy, which are natural human abilities. Telepathy is mind-to-mind communication. Empathy is soul-to-soul communication. And telepathy deals with words and interpreting the symbols that spirit gives us. And then empathy is the language of the soul. It's being able to understand and perceive through the eyes of that person. So that goes on into channeling, which there's a biblical reference to that in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians. It talks about tongues and interpretation of tongues, and they say that's the tongues of men and angels. So this is not anything new. That book was over 2,000 years ago-ish, sort of debatable on aspects of it, but it's interesting to think of that people talked about speaking in the tongues of men and angels. And of course, we all have many guides around us. We all have angels around us. And I think that sometimes we don't differentiate those spirits, and that's part of the discernment process. A person that passes becomes a spirit, and a guide is someone that's been assigned to us that's a higher consciousness or a higher being that's with us, that helps us through our material walk and helps us manifest in the physical dimension, and is very sort of like the link between the two worlds for us. And then our angels, that's an entirely different category of being, and they are there to help support things at the etheric level, like our life contract, our soul, high soul will. And our high soul can never be violated. So when we write our life contract, we make certain agreements when we come into the world, and then they're there to protect that. But they also work with healers and changing things at a karmic level. You actually can alter your karmic past and your karmic ties with people, but you have to work at a very high level of vibration to have that change occur at that high level, to have it be effective. And a lot of people with mediumship, they think, oh, I saw a ghost, am I a medium? No, because first of all, it's a natural ability for us to perceive the other side, but also the spirit themselves is communicating by showing themselves. And so as people develop their abilities, they go from sort of random, spontaneous occurrences, hit or miss, to being able to hold steady and maintain themselves in a theta state of mind, to actually, really getting elaborate with the detail. So.
Right on. My goodness. So there is more to it than people realize.
Yes.
We can also use tools as well. We know people that do divining using,
Yes.
like, oh God, what am I thinking of? Pendulums or divining rods. We have people that do tarot. I use tarot as a tool, just to enhance my intuition.
Sure.
And so many different tools are available as well. Trace, go ahead.
I was just going to insert there that the tools match the level of the person in terms of their development along that intuitive spectrum, or not their it's not a reflection of that, because all it's sort of like the higher accomplishment can use any of the tools below it
Right.
also. So it's not a limitation, it's just an expression of a type of thing. Our first tool is our body, again, our gut instinct,
Yeah.
just knowing, and then, just sensing I'm safe or I'm not safe, and good or bad. And then we begin using left brain tools when we get into intuition, and those are like numerology, astrology, and it's not that they can't be progressed into the intuitive, greater intuitive side, the clairvoyance and empathy and stuff too. They are just a tool, but I would call them a left brain tool and an analytical mind tool. And then we have body tools, which are like the pendulum, muscle testing, when you hold your arm out and they push down on it and you've lied, or push down, or it resists because it's true. Those kind of physical tools. Pendulum responds to little micro movements that we're subconsciously operating, and connection to spirits also. And then we go a little further and we start our psychic ability, and that's where that brain switch happens. That's where the brain flips from the left analytical to the right intuitive, and you learn to sustain it. And tarot is excellent for that, especially if you do it, as I'm sure you do, which it sounds like is spiritual tarot, which is when you use the cards, but the meaning of the exact card according to the book becomes less important.
Yeah.
Start seeing associations between the, oh, I noticed this element of this picture and this one's really far off, and it starts connecting with the life of that person, and that's called scrying.
Yes.
And so that's, something we do when we look at the clouds and interpret their shapes, or that's what we do when we look in a crystal ball. I love to do lithomancy, which is when you take rocks and crystals, and mine are smooth. I like that, except for the crystals, they're not. And you cast them and then look at the relationship between those things too, and the colors, and just things that it's a tool to switch your mind. And then as you continue along that, you need less of that. But you have to start somewhere with the reading. You have to start somewhere. And for some people, it's using a tool. For some people, they take a quick numerological look at the person, and that gives them their astrological sign and the year that they're in, and their birth, their life path number, which is like a boom, boom, boom shorthand for where they are. And I used to draw pictures when I started. I used to draw and I will still on request, but soul pictures, I call them energetic sketches, for lack of a better word. And that relaxed my mind so that I could go into it. Now I don't use tools unless my client specifically requests them, because I've learned to sustain that connection to the subconscious and trust it at a level that I didn't earlier. So yeah.
That's great. And, bringing up the topic of the tarot as a tool, it's funny, when I was, a quick story, when I was being trained to use the tarot, my teacher said, okay, memorize the book, memorize the pictures, and then once I got to that point, he handed me a stack of index cards, blank index cards, and he said, okay, now do a reading with the blank cards. And it was like through the placement.
Very nice. Oh, I love that.
It was like where the placement of the card was in the reading. Like if I do a Celtic spread, depending on where that card placement was, he told me just to look at the blank card and see what you see, and tell them what you see. And and that right there to me is what you were explaining about scrying. And that it's true. That's the way I do tarot. They speak to me differently every single time.
Yes, yeah, you can use anything. Another way that I began reading was accessing the information about that person by looking into their auric field, looking at the colors, letting those colors indicate a particular connection in my mind to something. Perhaps green, like you see behind me, could be healing, or it could be prosperity, it could be growth. It sort of allows your mind to feel over what you do know. And some people are afraid to ask their psychic or medium questions because they feel like they're somehow contaminating the field. But what they don't understand is you would be giving left brain fact that is not associated with subconscious intuitive truth. So you can't, well, everybody works differently, actually. Some people enjoy doing cold readings in that way, and other people, like myself, prefer it to be a little bit more structured, because I like my client's mind to be structured when they come in. I don't particularly care to be a performance for anyone.
Yeah.
I don't any longer do public mediumship. I used to do gallery readings and events, and with very few exceptions, I don't do those anymore because I'm focused on teaching. And I also don't like the focus to be on me particularly. I would like to have the reputation that I do for being an excellent and accurate reader, and teacher. You know, I love to teach, but when the person comes to you for a reading, you know, if there are other people present, then it distracts not me, but it distracts them from receiving energetically the fullness of what's being conveyed, because there's no way in their left mind, you know, left brain, that they could possibly absorb the depth of things that are coming through accurately. And that's why I encourage people to record their readings, because they will mishear, they will misunderstand, or they will not relate sometimes to a detail here or there, and then later the connections fit into place and it makes more sense to them at that time. And that's true for people that are prophetic, like yourself and like me.
Right,
you know?
right. I agree with you. I need to have that clarity and that non-distraction going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me ask you, Tracey, because we've spoken about this in the past, and actually that's kind of the focus of today's show, and also it's going to be what you'll be speaking on this Saturday, is the idea that we are all inherently psychic, that we all have the ability, some more natural than others. But what makes you feel that? Have you seen it? Is it just something that you know in your heart that we're all basically psychic?
Yeah. I think because I didn't make the association in my mind, you know, earlier in my life, I think I was near 50 when I first made that connection, that I was a medium. It all sort of connected and started forming a chain, and I was like, oh my God, that happened, and that was this, and that happened, and that was that. And so I'd love to give some examples of what I mean by that.
Yes, please do. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah. My very first memory was seeing spirits, and they were floating. I could just see their faces. They were above my crib. That's clairvoyance. And that doesn't always happen for people, so they may or may not relate to that point. But the next level was I had a claircognizant moment. Claircognizant is clear knowing. And I had, and probably a little bit of empathy and tied into it. I was 3 and I was moving from Connecticut to Virginia. And as I looked out the back window of my car, my parents had not thought to totally explain what was going on. And I just knew that I would never see my friends again. And I had a bit of sadness about that. That was just a clear knowing, a clear, claircognizance. Right. And then when I was probably about 4, I had misplaced my tricycle, and I was asking I was worried. I'm like, where's my tricycle? And I heard it's over there, and I'm sure, and it was, and that's clairaudience, clear hearing. Yeah. But I wouldn't have said, I have had a clairaudient experience. You know, who says that? And there were other things too, like when my grandmother passed, her spirit flew by me like a bird. And in that instant, I recognized her in a way that I had never recognized her when she was alive, and realized that we were quite similar in the way that we handled things, that we were able to endure tremendous pressure or suffering, but the second that we have a chance to get out the door, boom,
Yeah.
like that. And it correlated. Her spirit preceded her actual physical death by about 3 hours. And that would be clairvoyance and empathy. It'd probably be empathy more than clairvoyance because of the distance, maybe. And I didn't see her spirit. It was more a feeling of her being bird-like and flying away. But we kind of know things, we know, like, we get that intuition, like, turn left, and we argue. We're like, well, no, I'm going right. And it's like, turn left. And you're like, we just start
Right.
arguing. And I think that these are the ways that spirit begins to train us and to develop our confidence and to increase our ability too, when we listen to those small, still voice of our intuition that we think is us, but as we graduate along that spectrum, learn is actually the many, many beings that are around us, helping us in our process there.
Yeah, and I have to say that with that, I noticed that for myself within my own psychic development, there was a point where I just had to trust that still small voice. And it
Yes.
seems like that's a big hurdle for a lot of people, to trust their intuition. They know it, they feel it, but yet maybe their left brain is saying, no, that's crazy. How can you trust that? And I was wondering if you have any tips for people to get past that.
Yeah. First of all, people ask, how do you know if it's true? Well, if it's good and it is random, it's true. Like,
Yeah.
it's the real thing. But, people's left brain kind of argues. That's the part of us that's analytical. We want to know who, what, where, when, why.
Yep.
And our right brain is like, ooh, do you feel that? I see that. Do you imagine this? And we're afraid to trust that maybe we've made it up. But our imagination is actually our link between this world and the next. And so by allowing yourself, sometimes it's too intimidating when I'm teaching someone to say, what do you see? And they're like, nothing, because they're still very attached to the physical abilities that we have. And so I tell them that you see, hear, feel, and know in every cell of your body. And you know that because if somebody comes in behind you in your home, whether you hear them or not, you know which person it is.
Yeah.
You don't have to hear them or smell them or anything. You can just tell, oh, that's so-and-so. Or people have had things where the phone rings and they're like, oh, that's so-and-so. And then they're like, oh, how did I know that? And I think confidence comes with practice. And there is a point where you develop enough confidence that you're not shaken in the information that you begin getting. And I remember that point in, I don't remember the particular reading because it's been a while, but I remember the point where my client is like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And I didn't let it faze me one bit. I just said, well, this is what I am seeing, and this is what I'm hearing, and this is this, and you're not relating to it, so we'll just bicycle rack that for right now. And I went on with her reading, and I didn't allow it to disrupt me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the thing, is that we have so many distractions in our daily life that it's, especially when we have that monkey mind playing in the background. Oh, you're thinking about this, you're thinking about that. Honing your focus is something also as well that we need to develop on this particular path.
Yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up. I was just reading something I love the writings of C.W. Ledbetter. He wrote in the 1880s, like this is old school, okay? And he was talking about the difference between temporary and permanent psychic development. And what he meant by that, I hear your
You know that sound.
that sound. Maybe I can talk
Okay,
about that.
we'll be right back after this commercial break and continue our discussion with Medium Tracey Lockwood.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
And just before the break, Tracy, you were telling us about an author who you like. I forgot what you were saying. Can you continue with that thought?
Sure, absolutely. The author is C.W. Ledbetter, and he wrote at the turn of the century, actually the 1880s, so not quite the turn of the century there. And I was reading about him differentiating temporary versus permanent psychic development. And he was looking at it in the course of our soul, in the evolution of our soul itself. And he said that the temporary means just benefit us in this particular body, but don't advance our soul, and that they are just useful for getting glimpses into the other side. And I'll list some of those in just a second. But that there are permanent ways to develop that do advance your soul and help you move forward in your unfoldment and evolution of your soul. And some of the temporary means I had always discouraged people from, or shied away from myself, but I didn't understand why it is. And he considers them violent ways of suppressing the body in order to expose the soul, versus the permanent ways which allow the soul to mature and grow along with the body. And they ranged from, and some of these may surprise you, some will not surprise you, the use of mind-altering drugs to open your consciousness. They will open your consciousness, but they also open you up to all of these techniques actually open you up, but they also restrict your natural ability for protection. So you may become subject to other things that are not so pretty. Drugs and alcohol were two of them. I have nothing against somebody getting a glass of wine or whatever, but that's not while you're working in spirit.
Right.
And definitely not with a Ouija board.
Right, right.
Because a Ouija board's an open portal. But anyway, some of the other techniques that are temporary unfoldment or temporary evolution for your soul involved hypnosis. And self-hypnosis was included in that, including chanting or mantras or holotropic breathing, focusing on a mandala. All of those things will switch your brain, but they don't benefit you at a super deep level. They do give you access to the other side, but they don't change anything about you, because they're just a tool. They're external to you. The will of the mesmerist, the effect of the drug or whatever, they pass. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
They're temporary. And so for permanent development, he advocates three things. He advocates concentration, learning to focus. And I believe that he recommended that by you choosing whatever deity you relate to, whatever highest being that you relate to, whether it's Krishna or Ganesh or Sedna or Jesus or whoever, that you focus on them and start to feel what they feel like, and then allow yourself to start vibrating at that level. And then the next stage was meditation, and he used that a different way than one might think, but basically to open your consciousness and to start sustaining your contact, because it comes and goes, it bursts at first, and then you increase your ability to stay in that state of being. And then contemplation was interesting, because he talked about how we're not supposed to use our guides and angels. We don't pray to them like that. We can ask for their help, but then it's our job to contemplate what is blocking them from bringing what we asked for into our life, because they're going to do their job.
Right.
If you ask for finances, or you ask for a partner, or you ask for whatever it is you want, they will bring that to you. But there are certain blocks and barriers within each of us, sometimes because we don't resonate to the idea. And I thought that was interesting. And just last night, I was listening to Wayne Dyer on the YouTube, and he was talking about manifestation, and he was saying, let yourself imagine what you would feel like if you had what it was that you had, and just bask in that emotion. And I thought, what a nice shortcut, what a great practical way to connect with what it is that you want. And you know, C.W. Ledbetter did advise that you are in a physical world, so it may take some time for some things to come in your life, but the best that you can do is clear those things out. And I know for me, when I started my development seriously, even though I had these abilities all my life, I have countless numbers of stories. When I got really serious with it, I started meditating about an hour a day. And I am a lazy meditator. I don't like to even sit up. So I would lie down on my side and I would play either the Ultimate Om, which is a great, just zoned out CD. There's nothing subliminal. There are no biorhythms or any weird things going on there. It's just the tone and frequency of the universe. And there's one called Sacred Drums for your shamanic journey. That's just, they've scientifically shown that shamanic drums will switch your brain waves to theta faster, and anybody will switch it faster than anything else. And that's that repetitive drumming. You know it, but for your listeners, you know, it's that sort of Native American sounding dun 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 dun, you know, repetitive drumming. And so I would listen to that, and you know, an hour started to go by faster and faster, and my readings went from, you know, just being able to give bits and pieces or impressions and feedback to people on occasion, to being able to sustain a reading for however long was necessary to get her done.
Oh, wow.
So
good stuff. And you know, I have to comment on that, the idea of using consciousness changing or altering your mind, whether it be through drugs or chanting or whatever it is. I remember during my vision quest, when I did do a shamanic vision quest, very similar to the ayahuasca experience.
Oh,
and
yes.
when I was done, my teacher said to me, okay, now you know how to get there. Use your own mind to get there. In other words,
beautiful.
You took the helicopter to the top of the mountain, you saw the path, and now you know the path. So now go up the path without it.
Yes,
And,
yes.
He said the goal is, and I'll never forget this, as I still hold to this, the goal is that the shaman or the psychic, the mystic, can alter their state of consciousness at will, and eventually have one foot on all planes of consciousness.
Yeah, it's kind of a merging of your etheric body and your physical body. Doesn't make you any better or worse than anybody else. It's just and it's a perspective, I think, that you gain. And so you see the world differently when you look at it. When you see someone's behavior, you're less likely to be offended. It's not like we're saints. I mean, I get offended, okay? Right. but I'm just saying that we have a deeper understanding about why things are, and we're more open because you discipline your mind to let go of your ego and your intellect, also your ideas. You let go of that when you start doing that, because if you keep your own ideas, you're not going to be a very good reader. You'll be very limited in spectrum. You have to just see what comes, and it's delightful and interesting and fascinating, and it just makes life really great.
It certainly does. On to another aspect of this whole idea of the fact that we are all inherently psychic, I can't help but want to bring up, I wouldn't be justBernard if I didn't bring this up, the idea that we are going through a global spiritual awakening, and how many people are opening up to these symptoms of psychicism, and how this is playing a role in the evolution of humanity. And was wondering what some of your thoughts are on this global spiritual awakening.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because when I'm going to go back to C.W. Ledbetter in the 1800s, he was saying that as people experienced something, maybe through the mediumship of someone or through the messages of someone, their next natural step is to do, well, how can I do that? But what's happening now is kind of an acceleration of that. And people are spontaneously having mind-blowing experiences that are leaving them sometimes very disoriented or confused because the vibrations between the higher realms and this are so different that you can physically experience symptoms, and
Yeah.
you can also you haven't learned to regulate your energies, so it can really dramatically affect you, and people start wondering, am I crazy? Because they don't understand that they're looking at something that was achieved through their subconscious mind, but they're trying to understand it with their conscious mind, and the two are totally, it's like oil and water. You're
Yeah.
not gonna, I mean, you will ultimately be able to put into words and condense those experiences or those impressions or interpret those symbols. But words are maybe 7% of communication. They
Hmm.
say in the physical realm, and I absolutely think that's about all it is in the other dimension too. So people are sort of shaken and wanting to learn more, or they become like ferociously hungry, like I must learn,
Yes.
I know I was that way when I first intensified my focus on this.
Yeah, yeah, and you brought up a really good point, Tracy, about the interpretation, using words to interpret. And I know for me, it was a struggle to be able to eloquently communicate what it was that I was seeing during some readings or some
Yes.
experiences, spiritual experiences that I had, and you just can't put it into words sometimes. So there is a bit of practice that comes along there. How was it for you to
Yeah.
get the words out? I'm trying to explain what you were feeling and seeing.
That's why I started drawing pictures,
Oh,
because it
okay.
just was beyond words. But as you do practice, and I have to commend you because your intent is to convey the whole picture, right? Like you're trying to express what it is, and sometimes that information comes in several layers at a time.
Hmm.
I know people that can do better than this, but I can hear two simultaneous trains of thought from the spirit, so I can pick up on two messages simultaneous. So I'm like telling them one thing and jotting notes for myself so I can continue the message with the second train of thought. Um, but that not everybody can do that. And it kind of makes me think that that's part of evolving our soul, and that, the people that we would call ascended masters, like Kuan Yin and Jesus and some of the others out there, uh, they're able to communicate simultaneously with multitudes, not just two layers, but like multitudes of people simultaneously. And, being able to relax into during a reading when you're getting that depth of information, to just relax and take your time and describe every detail. Something I think probably the basic, most common error for someone starting to read is that they get a symbol and then they jump too fast. Like sometimes spirit will bring to mind a personal situation in your life as a reader so that you can understand what your client is going through, but
Yeah.
don't presume that they are going to respond the same way or that the advice would be the same. You have to continue to feel through that. And you clearly do that, but for the beginning reader, often if they see something, we talked about the color green, if their thoughts have been about prosperity, they might see the color green behind me and go, oh, she's going to really make a bundle.
Hmm.
And they might tell me that because they're jumping to a left brain answer to a right brain input. But maybe for me, it's about teaching and spiritual growth, or maybe needing to protect myself more effectively, or It could be other
Yeah, the
things.
heart chakra opening up.
Could be that too. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, I like that. I hope that's a message.
Maybe I just gave you one. I know it's funny. I just did a mini shamanic vision quest, and that was my message. Is I saw green, and my heart needed to open up. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I,
you have a beautiful heart. It's not a reflection that you're not a loving person, but maybe in receiving love for both of
that's
us.
exactly what it is. I
Yes.
know that's what it is, and I was smacking myself on the back of my hand with that thought. Like, come on, open up.
Right.
Um,
Allow it, allow it.
yes, yes. For those people that are watching this that are just now listening to our words and saying, wow, I can relate to what they're saying. I'm very interested in taking this a little bit further. What would be the first step that you might suggest to somebody? What book to read, what practice to practice, meditation,
Yeah.
movie, whatever it is that that might be a good jumping off point for them?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times you hear, that people should meditate, but that's kind of frustrating for someone that hasn't disciplined themselves or been around people. Sometimes it helps to be with other people that are doing the same thing, or choosing a teacher to guide you that way. But things that you can do, I think the first thing is balancing your own energies, being very honest with yourself about what parts of you um, need work, you know. And a lot of times people will recommend or prescribe a chakra balancing meditation, and there are so many of them. I think if I hear it again recommended, I may scream. But anyway, it's a beautiful thing the first time and the
Yeah.
second time and the fifth time, but after about the 200th time, it's like, yeah, whatever. It's
Yeah.
not new anymore. And so, beginning, I think they're very simple things that you can do. One of my favorite exercises is you can take a deck of playing cards, and you put them you shuffle them and put them face down, and then you put your hand on the deck and you sense red or black, and you can hear it sometimes like a word like red or black,
Hmm.
or you might find that you feel maybe a little more warmth when you feel the red. And if you continue to work with that, you'll learn where you lie to yourself, because as you pull that card, like let's say you felt red, boom, red, bam,
Right.
you feel it again, red, red, bam. And then you feel it again, and then you're like, red, no, I'm just in a pattern. And we start arguing
Yes.
with ourselves,
Yes.
and we pull it and we say black, but we pull it and it's red. Then we learn those nooks and crannies where we're starting to distrust the information
Yes.
that we're getting. And then you can get as sophisticated with that as you wish, because then you can differentiate the number on the card, or the particular suit, or whether it's a face card or not. And you can take that as far as you want. For me, I played with it one day and put it down, and but it did teach me
Yeah.
some things. You can take color chips of paint, like at the paint stores. I'm sorry, Lowe's and Home Depot, but they are free. And you can get a series of colors, and then you can uh, feel on the surface of the card, when you can see it, what it feels like, and then turn it upside down and see if you can feel it through the back, and then shuffle them and see if you can start identifying the color psychometrically.
Yeah.
Psychometry, you mentioned it
Yeah.
earlier, which is basically touching an object and reading the story from the object, letting these impressions, that opens your clairaudience, because you start getting flashes of imagery. It opens, clairvoyance,
Hmm.
sorry. I know the difference. Clairvoyance, seeing, flashes of things. It opens your clairaudience, because you might start hearing sounds, the crunch of gravel, or the wind in a tree or something like that. And then it can also affect your empathy, which is a very important part of developing your abilities. And don't feel, I think I would like to tell people, don't feel that if you're better at hearing things, or better at seeing things, or better at knowing things, or sensing things, and having trouble in some of those areas, it doesn't mean that that's the type of medium or psychic that you are. It just means that's where you are right then, and you can develop those other aspects as well too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't have to rely on just one thing. If one thing doesn't work for you, you can move on to another
Yeah.
type as well. Tracy, believe it or not, we have 1 minute left. Can you believe it?
No.
It went by very quickly, as usual.
Thank you, Bernard.
I want to just take a quick moment, of course, to let everybody know that Medium Tracey Lockwood will be appearing with myself and 3 other wonderful teachers in the Blue Ridge area this weekend at Luminary Ladies of the Blue Ridge here in Roanoke, Virginia. And actually, she has a wonderful package that if you buy a ticket, you can buy a ticket for $100 to get into the event as well. You can have a reading with her the next day, which is actually
Deal.
Sunday. And anyway, there's a lot of different packages available. Tracy, what's going on with you? Who's going to be on the show today, and what are you doing for the?
I have Delano Kyle coming on the show, and he's a spiritual teacher, a young guy, and we're going to have an unusual discussion about spiritual development. Can I tell people my website?
Yes, please give them all the information. Where can they find you?
Just very simple, mediumtracylockwood.com. And that's Tracy is spelled Tracey, mediumtracylockwood.com. And on YouTube, if you go to YouTube and put in Medium Tracey Lockwood, I'm going to talk to Bernard about how to get a cool URL after the show, or after the show's here. But anyway, just Medium Tracey Lockwood. You'll find.
And you have a Facebook page also, right?
Everything.
So you're all over the place there.
All that stuff.
Tracy, for those people that live out of town, can you do readings on Skype as well?
I do Skype for my international clients and students exclusively. I do them by phone for people within the U.S. And yes, they are just as accurate. I don't have any trouble. It's not less of a reading because you're not sitting in my office. Right.
No, of course. Well, thank you very much, Tracy, and stick around so we can chat after this, before your show for a second. But I just want to let everybody know that next week we're going to have a really incredible guest as well. Miriam Delicato will be joining me to share the message of the Tall Blondes for humanity. And we'll get more into that next week. We love everybody. Have a great week. Bye-bye.